The battle against terrorism has long tested the resilience of Burkina Faso. Villages, roads, and entire regions lived under constant threat, and for years it seemed that the enemy could strike at will. Yet what has unfolded in recent days marks a decisive shift. Fighters who once moved with confidence across forests and fields suddenly found themselves surrounded and crushed. They believed they had the advantage, hiding convoys beneath trees and gathering in remote clearings. But this time they were being watched every step of the way. What followed was the demonstration of a new kind of power. Precision strikes from the skies joined with rapid maneuvers on the ground, leaving no room for escape. The enemy, who expected to intimidate communities and disrupt daily life, faced an overwhelming response that shattered their ranks. Behind these victories stands the vision of President Ibrahim Traoré, a leader determined to transform the security landscape of his country. By combining modern technology with the bravery of ground forces, he has reshaped the battlefield into one where terrorists no longer dictate the rules. This story is not only about weapons and tactics. It is about a people reclaiming their future. Villages once abandoned are finding new hope. Markets are reopening, schools are guarded, and families are beginning to believe that safety can return. Each successful operation sends the same message. Fear will not triumph over unity and strength. The latest operations revealed how the army has mastered the art of merging air power with ground assault. At the center of this success are the rapid intervention battalions, known for their speed and aggression, moving side by side with elite special forces. Their steps on the ground are never blind. Every maneuver is guided by eyes in the sky, where unmanned aircraft circle patiently above, mapping every convoy, every motorcycle column, every hidden camp. This is the new reality on the front lines. Battles that once stretched across days now end within hours. The initiative no longer belongs to the attackers. It belongs to the nation, its soldiers, and its people. The recent operations in Burkina Faso have revealed how the military has learned to master a new rhythm of battle, one that fuses air power and ground maneuvers into a seamless chain of strikes. At the core of this transformation are the rapid intervention battalions, units designed to move with speed and precision, working side by side with elite special forces. Their actions on the ground are never random. Every step they take is guided by intelligence from above, where unmanned aircraft maintain a constant watch, tracing the paths of convoys, motorcycle columns, and hidden camps scattered across the bush. The strategy is deliberate. Drones identify a target and track it with patience. They follow movements through forests, across dry riverbeds, or along dirt roads. They wait for the right moment when the group is most exposed. Once confirmed, the signal is given. Precision munitions fall from the skies, scattering fighters, destroying vehicles, and breaking stockpiles of fuel and ammunition. In the seconds that follow, the ground units move in. Battalions close off escape routes, cutting through fields and blocking trails. Special forces advance to capture or eliminate those who survived the initial strike. What once required days of pursuit is now resolved in hours. This change is unmistakable compared to past campaigns. Previously, soldiers often chased shadows across vast terrain, always reacting to sudden raids. The enemy dictated the pace, but today it is Burkina Faso that sets the tempo. Camps once thought unreachable are destroyed in minutes. Convoys that believed they could disappear into the bush are tracked relentlessly until there is nothing left to hide. The battlefield has shifted from one of uncertainty to one of deliberate control. Technology has played a decisive role. Armed drones such as the Bayraktar TB2 and the larger Akinci are not just machines. They have become shields for villages and hammers against those who spread fear. Their guided munitions tear through vehicles hidden beneath thick trees, demolish makeshift depots, and burn stolen fuel before it can be used. On the ground, upgraded rifles, night vision gear, and improved communications allow Burkina Faso's soldiers to act with precision, striking with confidence that was absent in earlier years. The effect is visible. Fighters who once believed mobility was their advantage now find themselves trapped in their own patterns. One recent operation showed this clearly. A convoy attempted to move at dusk, hoping to vanish under the cover of shadows. From above, a drone tracked the line of motorcycles as they split into groups, weaving through the trees. The operators held their fire, mapping every turn. When the fighters gathered again at a clearing, the strike came without warning. Explosions lit the sky, scattering men and machines. Within minutes, ground units closed in from two sides, cutting off the escape routes. By the time the dust settled, the battle was over. For the soldiers who fought on the ground, the difference was profound. Instead of exhausting marches over uncertain terrain, they advanced with clarity, knowing exactly where to strike and when. For the communities nearby, the difference was even greater. What might have become another night of fear ended before it could begin. Farmers who had abandoned their fields returned to find the enemy gone, and children woke to the sound of trucks rather than gunfire. This evolution in tactics is not only about destroying enemies, it is about reshaping the very nature of security. Each success proves that the initiative now rests with the nation. The days when terrorists dictated the rules are fading. The battleground that once favored surprise and mobility is being replaced by a doctrine of precision and control. And for the people of Burkina Faso, that doctrine is already changing daily life. But this raises a question. If drones and rapid battalions can end battles in hours, what happens when the enemy learns to adapt? When they change routes, scatter in smaller groups, or use deception to hide from the eyes above? Among the most decisive moments of this campaign were the strikes aimed directly at the leaders of armed groups who had long directed violence from the shadows. These figures believed they were untouchable. By constantly moving through forests, sleeping in hidden camps, and gathering in remote villages, they thought no one could track them. Yet their habits betrayed them. Unmanned aircraft circled silently overhead, mapping every pattern. Step by step, the drones recorded where they slept, when they moved, and how often they met. The hunters had become the hunted. One operation illustrates this turning point. Late in the afternoon, under a dense canopy of trees, a group of commanders gathered with their guards. They were planning raids, giving orders, and trying to reassure their men that the fight was still in their hands. What they did not know was that every gesture, every movement, and even the rhythm of their routine was being observed. At the signal, a guided munition cut through the canopy. In an instant, the meeting turned into chaos. Fighters scattered in all directions, smoke rising through the branches. Those who fled were met by ground units closing in fast, sealing off every path. By nightfall, the leadership that had orchestrated attacks for months was gone. The impact was not just tactical, but psychological. Fighters who once drew courage from their commanders now found themselves without direction. Rumors spread quickly through the ranks. No leader was safe, no place could shield them. The sense of invincibility that had carried these groups for years collapsed in hours. Soldiers reported that intercepted communications were filled with confusion. Units that once moved boldly now hesitated, unsure whether to continue or retreat. Fear, once a weapon used by terrorists against civilians, had turned back upon them. For the people of Burkina Faso, these eliminations carried a powerful message. Families who had buried loved ones after raids whispered that justice was being served. Farmers said they could see hope in their children's eyes again. A shopkeeper in Kaya described how the night felt quieter than it had in years, as if the very air was lighter. One widow, whose husband had been taken months before, told aid workers that she prayed not for revenge but for safety, and that for the first time she believed safety was possible. These small voices echoed across the countryside, reinforcing the sense that change was finally real. The soldiers themselves felt the shift as well. A sergeant, returning from the operation that cut down a notorious commander, explained that his men fought with renewed confidence. "For once we knew we were not chasing shadows," he said. "We were closing the chapter on fear." His words reflected a broader sentiment, that the war was no longer an endless pursuit, but a struggle with a clear direction. Each victory, each eliminated leader was a step toward reclaiming dignity. Yet not all reactions were celebrations. Within days, whispers began of potential reprisals. Militants angry at the loss of their leaders might turn their frustration on soft targets, villages, aid convoys, or even schools. Community leaders urged vigilance. Elders told their youth to remain alert. This tension underscored the reality that while victories were real, the danger was not gone. For every leader removed, there remained fighters willing to strike back. The challenge was to maintain the momentum without allowing complacency to creep in. International observers also noted the shift. Analysts described the operations as a sign that Burkina Faso was no longer fighting in the past. "They are rewriting the playbook," one regional expert remarked. For years, mobility was the terrorists' advantage. Now technology and coordination are closing that gap. Some praised the boldness of the new doctrine, while others cautioned that sustained success would depend on training, logistics, and continued support from communities. Either way, the world was paying attention. This climax in the campaign showed clearly that the fight was no longer about chasing enemies across endless terrain. It had become about striking at the heart of their networks, dismantling chains of command, and breaking the illusion of safety. Each targeted strike carried more than a military result. It dismantled the myth that leaders could operate freely. It showed that even the most protected figures were vulnerable, and that the balance of fear had shifted. Still, this raises a pressing question. If leaders can be eliminated and fighters scattered, what happens next for the ordinary people living in these contested regions? Will the victories on the battlefield translate into protection for villages, schools, and markets? Or will the enemy, desperate and leaderless, lash out at civilians to prove they still have teeth? The victories on the battlefield were not measured only by destroyed camps or eliminated commanders. They were measured in the lives of civilians who finally saw a chance to reclaim their normal routines. For years, entire regions of Burkina Faso had lived under siege. Roads were unsafe, markets stood empty, and schools closed their doors as families fled violence. This time, however, the army made sure that each military gain was matched by visible relief for the people. Convoys carrying sacks of grain, boxes of medicine, and barrels of clean water rolled into towns that had been cut off for months. Soldiers escorted the trucks mile by mile, clearing the way so that no ambush could interrupt the delivery. The sight of long lines of vehicles entering a once silent community was more than logistics. It was a statement. The nation had not forgotten its citizens. Families who had rationed scraps of millet now received full bags of food. Mothers who had worried every day about fever or infection in their children found medicine at the local clinic. Even herds of livestock, stolen by armed groups and used to fund their campaigns, were recovered and returned. A shepherd in the north wept openly as he led his cattle home, calling it a sign that life itself was being restored. The government extended this care to the most vulnerable. Children orphaned by conflict were given direct support. Aid was delivered not to faceless institutions but to the caretakers and relatives who struggled to provide shelter. Programs for displaced families began helping them resettle with dignity, offering materials to rebuild homes, tools to farm again, and even teachers to restart schools. These gestures were not only humanitarian, they were political, forging a new bond of trust between state and citizen. For villagers who had previously seen soldiers only in moments of fear and battle, this was a transformation. The military was no longer a distant force. It became a shield, a partner, a source of survival. The reaction among the people was unmistakable. In villages once silenced by fear, markets stirred with activity. Farmers, though cautious, returned to their fields. Children gathered under shade trees with notebooks in hand as teachers resumed their lessons. In churches and mosques, prayers of gratitude replaced whispers of despair. Ordinary voices carried extraordinary weight. A farmer in the east said simply, "We believe again that our children can grow up here." Such words, quiet yet steady, reflected a political shift as much as a social one. For the government of President Ibrahim Traoré, these changes were crucial. Military victories without civilian trust can be hollow, but victories tied to relief and restoration become the foundation of legitimacy. By showing that the state could both defeat attackers and care for its people, Traoré strengthened his position at home. His speeches framed each success not only as a win for the army, but as proof of national rebirth. He saluted displaced families, praised volunteers, and reminded soldiers that their mission was not only to fight, but to protect. This message resonated deeply. It linked the battlefield to the kitchen, the schoolyard, and the market stall. It tied the idea of security to daily life, where every citizen could see and feel the difference. Politically, the effect was twofold. Within Burkina Faso, it built unity. Citizens who once doubted the government's ability to act now had reasons to believe. Communities that had felt abandoned were drawn back into the fold. Internationally, it demonstrated that the country was capable of implementing a coherent security strategy, one that combined technology, ground forces, and community defense with humanitarian relief. Allies and critics alike could see that this was not merely about fighting. It was about governing. Still, challenges remain. Terrorist networks, though weakened, are not erased. Fighters who lost leaders may attempt desperate strikes to prove relevance. Civilians, while hopeful, remain alert, fearing reprisals. Some displaced families hesitate to return, worried that the calm is temporary. Local officials caution that aid convoys must continue, not just once but repeatedly, to keep trust alive. If supply lines falter or security gaps open again, the fragile bond could fray. This raises a deeper political question. Can the state sustain this momentum over months and years, or will the burden of constant vigilance exhaust its resources? A senior official admitted that the pace of operations is demanding. Drones require maintenance, soldiers need rest, and aid supplies must keep flowing. Success today is real, but sustainability tomorrow is uncertain. The opposition, though weakened, may argue that the government is overextending itself. International observers may press for evidence that human rights are protected as tightly as borders. These debates will shape the next phase of Burkina Faso's struggle. Yet despite these uncertainties, one fact stands out. Ordinary people are living with less fear than before. That shift, however fragile, is the most powerful political message of all. The struggle is no longer defined only by battles in the bush. It is defined by the reopening of schools, the hum of markets, the prayers of families who dare to hope again. Every sack of grain delivered, every child who writes their name on a blackboard, every farmer who plants a field is a political act, declaring that terror has failed to break the nation's will. But here lies the question that will shape the months ahead. Will these civilian gains hold firm if the enemy, desperate and leaderless, seeks revenge? And how will the world, particularly the United States and other powers, respond to a Burkina Faso that insists on defining its own path to security? The shockwaves of Burkina Faso's recent operations have not stopped at its borders. Across the Sahel and far beyond, observers are weighing what these victories mean for the region and for global security. For the first time in years, international analysts are speaking of Burkina Faso not as a country overwhelmed by insurgency, but as a state capable of rewriting the rules of the fight. In Washington, the development sparked careful attention. For American policymakers, the Sahel has long been a zone of both risk and opportunity. The collapse of security here threatens not only regional stability but also broader interests. Trade routes, counterterrorism partnerships, and the prevention of safe havens for groups with global ambitions. The sight of Burkina Faso turning the tide using modern drones, rapid battalions, and community defense raises questions. Should the United States deepen cooperation with Ouagadougou, or should it watch cautiously, concerned about governance, human rights, and the long-term sustainability of this new doctrine? Some voices in the U.S. security community argue that the campaign offers proof that African nations can build self-reliance without permanent foreign troops. They see in Traoré's approach an experiment that could reduce dependence on Western intervention. Others are less convinced. They worry that if the momentum fades, the vacuum could return stronger than before. Congressional hearings have already hinted at these debates, asking whether drone warfare in the Sahel will stabilize the region or sow future grievances. In Europe, reactions are equally divided. Nations with historical ties to West Africa, such as France, watch closely, aware that their own role has diminished. Some European commentators praise the speed of Burkina Faso's adaptation, noting that a once embattled army has learned to merge technology with ground operations more effectively than many larger states. Others express caution, pointing out that victories in the field do not erase deep-rooted economic and political challenges. Regionally, the effect is undeniable. Neighboring countries see both hope and warning. Hope because Burkina Faso's success suggests that terrorists can be driven back when nations invest in coordination, intelligence, and community defense. Warning because insurgent groups pushed out of one country often attempt to regroup in another. Niger and Mali, facing their own battles, are already moving to strengthen cross-border patrols and intelligence sharing. The message is clear: the fight cannot be won by one nation alone. International media has added its own layer of interpretation. Some outlets highlight the courage of Burkina Faso's soldiers and the resilience of its people. Headlines speak of a turning point in the Sahel and a nation reclaiming its future. Yet others strike a different tone, questioning whether reliance on drones risks civilian harm, whether aid convoys can be sustained, and whether political unity will hold. The narrative is contested, but the attention itself reflects a new reality. Burkina Faso is shaping conversations far beyond its size or borders. All of this places President Ibrahim Traoré at the center of a global stage he did not choose but cannot avoid. His leadership is judged not only by citizens in Ouagadougou or farmers in Kaya, but also by diplomats in New York, Washington, and Brussels. Each speech, each decision sends ripples outward. When he frames the fight as both a military and moral struggle, he appeals to values that resonate worldwide: justice, dignity, and the defense of ordinary lives. Still, the international spotlight cuts both ways. Greater recognition can bring partnerships and support, but it can also bring scrutiny and pressure. The United States, Europe, and regional allies will watch closely to see if Burkina Faso can maintain momentum, uphold civilian protection, and resist the temptation of heavy-handed tactics. If it succeeds, it may inspire a model for others. If it falters, critics will be quick to claim that the victories were temporary, the hope short-lived. This leaves a question hanging over the international debate. Is Burkina Faso's campaign the start of a durable shift in the Sahel, or is it only a moment of strength before new storms arrive? And if the balance shifts again, will outside powers step in, or will they leave the nation to face its fate alone? The victories of recent weeks have changed the tone of the fight in Burkina Faso, but they have not ended it. History shows that when armed groups lose ground, they often turn to desperate measures. Already, whispers circulate that militants may seek revenge against soft targets: villages, aid convoys, or schools. Every sack of grain delivered, every classroom reopened, is not just a symbol of progress, but also a potential target for those who wish to prove they are still dangerous. The challenge is clear: holding the gains will be harder than winning them. The coming months will test whether Burkina Faso can sustain both the pace of military operations and the steady flow of civilian support. Drones must be maintained, soldiers rotated, and aid convoys kept safe. Communities that have tasted hope must not be left exposed. If gaps appear, if supplies fail, or if vigilance falters, the bond of trust could weaken quickly. That is the nature of this struggle. Victories inspire hope, but only consistency builds lasting security. There is also a wider horizon to consider. The Sahel is not a single battlefield, but a chain of linked fronts. If coordination with neighbors falters, fighters pushed from one region may regroup in another. If regional cooperation deepens, however, the tide could continue to turn. This raises a sharp question. Will nations of the Sahel forge a true shield together, or will each fight alone until exhaustion sets in? For the United States and the wider world, the stakes are high. A stable Burkina Faso strengthens the region. An unstable one threatens to spread chaos outward. Washington, Paris, and other capitals will weigh their choices carefully. But in the end, it is not foreign speeches that will decide the outcome. It is the resilience of Burkinabe families, the vigilance of soldiers on patrol, and the leadership that ties them together. So what does this mean for the people listening tonight? It means that every act of courage, whether planting a field, teaching a class, or standing guard at a checkpoint, is part of a national rebirth. It means that the battle is about more than defeating enemies. It is about restoring dignity and reclaiming the future. And it leaves us with one final question. Is President Ibrahim Traoré the hope that will anchor Burkina Faso's future, or the risk that may draw it into greater storms? If this story has touched you, reflect on what matters most to defend. Is it justice, family, or the quiet right of children to walk safely to school? Let your heart answer. If you believe in dignity and in a rising Africa, carry that belief beyond this moment, into your prayers, into your conversations, into your choices. Because nations are not only shaped by leaders or battles, they are shaped by the values their people refuse to surrender. May God bless Burkina Faso. May He bless Africa, the land of resilience, of hope, and of an unbroken will.